All right, everyone, welcome back to the Duo Dialogues here on YouTube. Always a pleasure having you with us. If you've been keeping up with our IELTS series,
This is it.
this is the final deep dive.
We're going to bring it all together.
Yeah, we're zeroing in on all those crucial last steps for the IELTS exam. Think about how to spend that last week, what to expect on the actual day,
Exactly.
We want you to walk in feeling prepared and confident.
We're giving you the success checklist,
Yeah.
drawing on everything we've learned so far throughout this whole series.
Absolutely. So let's kick things off with that final week, the week leading up to the exam.
Right before the big day.
This is not the time for frantic cramming.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Our sources really emphasize that this week should be about smart revision.
Reinforcing what you already know, not trying to absorb, tons of new information.
Right.
So where should we really be focusing our energy?
I'd say primarily revisiting your notes.
Yeah.
Looking back at grammar areas you've worked on, refreshing that key vocabulary.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about strengthening those neural pathways that you've already built.
Okay, so it's like a final quality check on all the foundations that you've built over time. And one thing that kept coming up in the material was this daily speaking practice in this last week.
Right.
Why is that so vital at this stage?
Well, you see, consistent speaking practice now really helps to solidify your fluency and build your confidence.
When you need it most.
Precisely when you need it most.
Mm-hmm.
It also gives you these valuable opportunities to pinpoint any areas where you might still hesitate or, struggle with certain vocabulary or grammatical structures.
So it's like fine-tuning
Exactly.
your spoken English.
Yeah.
Now, the advice to record yourself speaking can be a little bit intimidating.
It can be.
For some people.
Sure.
I know I remember when I first tried it, I was cringe listening back to myself.
Yeah, it feels awkward initially,
Uh-huh.
but it's a really powerful tool for self-assessment. When you listen back, you become much more aware of your pacing. Are you speaking too quickly? Are you speaking too slowly?
Right.
You also notice your pronunciation patterns.
Yeah.
And any filler words that you might be overusing, or way more than you think you are.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and it gives you that objective feedback that you wouldn't really get otherwise.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so now let's talk about those full-length mock tests
Right.
that our sources recommend. How crucial are they in this final week?
Simulating the entire exam experience is really vital. Taking those full listening, reading, and writing tests back to back really helps you build that mental stamina that you're going to need for the real exam.
It's like a marathon.
Yeah, you get accustomed to the specific time constraints of each section. You understand the overall rhythm and flow of the test day.
So it's not just about testing your knowledge, it's about practicing the performance.
Exactly.
Under exam conditions.
It's a performance. Yeah. Exactly. And in addition to these full simulations, it's also beneficial to do some focused review of common IELTS vocabulary and phrases that you've encountered in your practice materials. This isn't about learning brand new words. It's about actively recalling and being comfortable using the language that's most relevant to typical IELTS topics.
So really honing in on the vocab.
Exactly.
That's likely to come up. Okay, so we've got a clear picture now of the final week.
Yeah.
Let's shift our focus to the day right before the exam.
Okay.
What should our priorities be?
I think the day before is all about preparation and relaxation. Our sources unanimously stress the importance of getting a proper night's sleep.
Oh, absolutely.
7 to 8 hours. Being well rested will have a huge impact on your concentration and performance during the test.
Yeah, no all-nighters?
No all-nighters trying to cram all night will almost certainly backfire.
It'll backfire. Okay, so we've got the sleep down?
Yep.
What about what we eat that day?
Opt for light, easily digestible meals. Avoid heavy or unfamiliar foods that could potentially cause, any stomach upset.
Right.
You want to feel energized and comfortable, not sluggish or distracted by digestive issues.
Makes sense. Keep it simple.
Keep it simple and nourishing.
Nourishing. Okay, so now is also the perfect time to make sure that all of our practical arrangements are in order.
Exactly. Gather all your necessary documents together. Your original identification document, usually a passport, the one you use during registration, and your official exam confirmation.
Yeah.
Double check that you know exactly where your test center is located.
Oh, yeah.
Plan your route to get there,
Yeah.
accounting for potential traffic or delays.
Just eliminating any of that last-minute logistical stress.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's key. And, our source also mentioned cultivating a positive mindset the day before.
Absolutely.
how can someone actively do that?
Visualization can be a really effective technique. Spend some time imagining yourself going through the exam calmly and successfully. Review the progress you've made in your preparation. Acknowledge the hard work you've put in. Actively steer your thoughts away from anxiety or potential difficulties.
Right.
And focus on your strengths.
Right.
Maybe think about previous practice tests where you performed well.
So really reinforcing that sense of preparedness.
Exactly.
And capability in your own mind. Okay, so now let's think about the actual exam day. What are the essential items that someone absolutely needs to bring with them?
Okay, the absolute non-negotiable is your original valid identification document.
Okay.
The same passport or ID card that you used when you registered for the exam. Without it, you won't be allowed to take the test.
Right. No ID.
No exam.
No exam. Okay. What other practical items are necessary?
You'll typically need your own pens, pencils, usual HB, and a clean eraser. For the writing and reading sections, it's always a good idea to have a couple of spares of each.
Right.
Just in case you don't want a broken pencil to derail your concentration.
Absolutely. Okay. How about a water bottle? Staying hydrated seems pretty important for focus.
Yeah, a transparent water bottle without any labels is usually permitted in the exam room, so you can stay hydrated.
Okay.
But it's always best to check the specific regulations of your test center beforehand, because rules can vary slightly.
Good point. Better to be safe than sorry.
Yeah, and our source also mentioned bringing a non-smartwatch.
Now, why is that recommended?
A basic non-smart analog or digital watch can be really helpful for keeping track of the time during the different sections of the exam.
Right.
Again, though, it's crucial to check the test center's rules because some may have restrictions even on simple watches. But smartwatches and any electronic devices are almost always prohibited.
Okay. And I think perhaps the most crucial thing to bring on exam day, according to all of our sources,
is confidence.
Is confidence.
Believe in the preparation you've done, trust in your abilities, and equally important, try to leave any lingering stress or anxiety outside the exam room.
Yeah, it's not going to help you once the test begins.
That's exactly.
Okay, so let's dive into some specific tips for each part of the exam.
Okay.
Starting with the speaking test. What are some key things to keep in mind during that interaction with the examiner?
First impressions can have a subtle but positive impact in the speaking test. So dress neatly and professionally. It shows respect for the examiner and the overall testing environment.
Right.
It also tends to boost your own sense of confidence and professionalism.
And that confidence can really shine through in your speaking.
Absolutely. When you enter the room, make eye contact with the examiner, offer a genuine smile, and greet them politely.
Yeah.
For example, with a clear good morning or good afternoon.
Right.
This sets a positive tone for the interaction.
Okay, so what if, those nerves really kick in and you find yourself feeling a bit flustered when you get a question?
Well, it's completely normal to feel nervous.
Right.
If you need a brief moment to gather your thoughts before responding to a question, don't be afraid to take a short pause. It's much better to pause momentarily and then give a coherent and well-structured answer than to rush into a disjointed or rambling response.
Yeah.
Phrases like, "That's an interesting question. Let me think for a moment," can buy you that valuable time.
I love that tip. That's such a good tip.
That's a good one.
It's not about being the fastest speaker. It's about being the clearest.
Exactly.
And our source emphasizes the importance of speaking naturally and avoiding memorized responses.
Absolutely.
Why is that so critical?
Well, examiners are highly trained to recognize when a candidate is delivering a pre-prepared, memorized answer.
Right.
They're primarily assessing your ability to communicate authentically and spontaneously, expressing your own thoughts and ideas in English. And memorized responses often sound unnatural.
Yeah.
They lack genuine engagement with the question.
You don't sound real.
Exactly, and they might not even directly address what was asked.
Okay, so the key is genuine communication. Okay, now what about those little hesitations that we all have when we're thinking on the spot?
Right.
Our source mentioned using fillers.
Yes.
How can we use them effectively?
Yes, using appropriate filler phrases can actually make your speech sound more natural and less robotic.
Interesting.
Phrases like, "Well, let me see," or "That's an interesting point," can give you a brief moment to organize your thoughts without long, awkward silences.
Right.
But the key is moderation. Don't overuse fillers to the point where they become distracting or impede your fluency.
So it's all about balance.
Yeah, think of them as brief thinking pauses expressed verbally.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Now let's move on to the listening, reading, and writing sections.
Right.
What are some crucial strategies that we should keep in mind for these?
For the listening test, the very first thing you should do when the recording starts is to quickly check that your headphones are working correctly.
Oh, that's smart.
And that the audio is clear. Maintain your focus intently right until the very last second of the recording.
Okay.
Because crucial information or answers can often come right at the end.
Right at the end.
So don't let your attention wander.
Stay engaged till the final word.
Yes. And what about effective strategies for the reading section?
Yeah, what about reading?
Effective time management is crucial in the reading test.
Mm-hmm.
Our sources generally suggest allocating around 20 minutes per passage.
Okay.
Try your best to stick to this time frame.
Right.
To ensure you have enough time to attempt all the questions across all 3 passages.
Yeah.
Because it's easy to get drawn into a particularly interesting or challenging passage and lose track of time.
Oh, yeah. You get so bogged down trying to understand every single word.
Exactly. And if you find yourself really struggling with a particular question or an entire passage, it's often a better strategy to make an educated guess if necessary.
Yeah, right.
Mark it and move on.
Okay.
You can always come back to it later if you have any time remaining.
Right. And for the writing section, planning your answer before you start writing is absolutely vital for both task 1 and task 2.
For both.
Why is that initial planning stage so important?
Because planning helps you to structure your essay or report logically, ensuring that your ideas flow coherently and that you address all aspects of the task prompt.
Right.
Use brief notes or an outline to organize your main points, supporting ideas, and the overall structure of your response.
That's going to lead to a much more focused piece of writing.
Much more focused and well-organized piece of writing.
So is there a golden rule that kind of applies across all 3 of these sections, listening, reading, and writing?
Yes. Always try to leave a few minutes at the end of each section to carefully review your answers.
Okay.
Check for any careless errors in spelling, grammar, punctuation in your writing.
Yeah.
And make sure you haven't missed any questions in the reading and listening sections. You know, those small mistakes can sometimes cost you valuable marks unnecessarily.
Yeah, little oversights. Exactly.
Can sometimes make a big difference.
In your final score.
Okay, so we've talked about time management for each section individually.
Right.
But are there any overarching time management strategies for the entire exam day?
Yes. It's important to be aware of the total time allocated for each paper listening, reading, and writing, and to pace yourself accordingly within those overall limits.
Right.
For example, during the writing test, our sources suggest a guideline of spending approximately 20 minutes on task 1 and around 40 minutes on task 2, recognizing that task 2 typically carries a higher weighting in the scoring.
Right.
Keep an eye on the clock throughout the entire writing test.
So it's about being strict with that time.
Exactly. And in the listening test, pay very close attention to the instructions given regarding the number of words you are allowed to use for each answer.
Right.
Exceeding the specified word limit.
Yeah.
Even if your answer is conceptually correct, can unfortunately lead to your answer being marked as incorrect.
So precision is important. Precision is important. So it's not just about understanding the content and finding the right information.
Yeah.
But also about adhering strictly to the specific format and requirements of each task.
Absolutely. Now, as we're coming to the end of this deep dive, let's talk about something that underpins all of this.
Okay.
Your mindset on exam day.
Yes. This is arguably one of the most critical elements for success.
I agree.
Our sources consistently emphasize that the IELTS is fundamentally a test of your ability to communicate effectively in English, not a test of achieving perfect English.
That is so important to remember.
Even native English speakers make mistakes in their daily communication.
All the time. Yeah, it really takes some of the pressure off trying to be absolutely flawless.
Exactly. Go into the exam believing in the preparation you've undertaken. Trust the English language skills you've developed through your studies and practice.
Right.
You put in the effort. So have faith in that hard work paying off.
And remember, the IELTS exam is just one step on your broader journey of learning and using the English language.
Exactly.
It's an important milestone, but it's certainly not the final destination.
A means to an end.
Yeah.
Opening up exciting opportunities for education, career advancement, and personal growth in an increasingly globalized world.
So as you walk into that exam room, what is the final, most empowering message that we want to leave our listeners with?
Walk in like a winner.
Yeah.
You have prepared for this. Be proud of the journey you've undertaken, the progress you've made in your English language skills, and the dedication you've shown.
That's a really powerful and motivating message.
Thank you.
So to quickly recap our success checklist, prioritize sleep the night before, focus on smart revision in the final week, cultivate a calm and positive mindset.
Yes.
Only take the essentials with you speak naturally and clearly in the speaking test.
Right.
Manage your time effectively across all sections, and above all, believe in your preparation and your ability.
And remember that your ability to communicate effectively is what truly matters. You've come this far, and you are absolutely ready to give it your very best shot.
This has been the Duo Dialogues, your companion in navigating the IELTS exam. We sincerely wish you the very best of luck for your IELTS test.
Absolutely.
We're really rooting for you.
Remember, the world is waiting for your English.
Thank you so much for joining us for this final installment in our IELTS series. We really hope that these deep dives have been helpful in your preparation. If you found this information valuable, please do let us know in the comment section down below. We'd love to hear about your experiences and what other topics you'd be interested in us exploring in future videos right here on the Duo Dialogues.